Do you
Sure.
believe that there can be uh, two existing world reserve currencies to simultaneously exist?
I do, and I think that could happen. I think it's quite realistic that a lot of the world is just done with the dollar as their reserve currency. And I think that there's a lot of places that are willing to try something else. And one of my scenarios, and I don't think it's going to play out quickly, but like one of my wild case success scenarios for a digital asset is if countries start to realize that the US dollar is not going to be the reserve currency forever. Other things are going to be the reserve currency. And the same thing that we saw with banks. Like people when we started selling software to banks, people would say to me, why would a bank use something that like you guys were selling them when they could use something that was like made by banks? And what they didn't realize is that only like 10 banks in the country on the planet are Deutsche Bank, HSBC, Credit Suisse, JP Morgan Chase, like the ones who would build a system that the entire planet would run on. For the rest of the banks, that's 6,000 smaller banks. Those are their biggest, strongest competitors. Those are the entities they hate the most. They would not want to use the system built and maintained by them because it's going to be biased in favor of them, their biggest and strongest competitors. And I think the same thing could happen to nations. Like every nation would love for their currency to be the world reserve currency. That's helped the US, that's grown the US economy, quote unquote, unfairly by leaps and bounds for decades. And every other country would be like, yeah, we'd like to have the world be the world's reserve currency. But the only countries that could possibly pull it off is the US holding its position, maybe the EU, maybe Russia, maybe one or two others. But realistically, most countries know that if there's going to be a new world reserve currency that's a country's currency, it's not going to be them. And so they might actually prefer a currency that nobody can control to one that's controlled by their largest geopolitical rivals. And so that's like what I think is the biggest possible success scenario for digital for digital assets if these countries are like, okay, well, the US dollar can't hold on forever, but it's not going to be our currency because no one's going to want to repeat the US dollar scenario. Nobody but the EU wants the EU to replace the dollar, right? Nobody but Russia wants the ruble to replace the dollar. Nobody but China wants the yuan to replace the dollar. So maybe they could settle on a currency that nobody could control rather than one controlled by their most powerful geopolitical rival. So if you want a success scenario, that's the one that I think is the most likely.
But the money question is, how do you get everybody to agree?
Well, I mean, they might agree if the alternative is that their geopolitical rivals force some new replacement for the dollar that's not, that just if they just replace, the old boss with a new boss. If the choice is no boss, if that happens to make a bunch of cryptocurrency people rich, I don't think they're going to see that as too much of a minus.
That's good.
It was
Uh,
great talking to you guys.
I got one question, just one
Uh,
question. Sorry, David.
one more, and then
Thank
I
you,
gotta
David.
leave.
It's kind of